This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
We always hear about World War II as this completely unified American effort.
Right.
But the truth is way more complicated.
Yeah.
There were these pockets of resistance kind of hidden underneath that narrative of unity.
Absolutely.
We're not even talking about like enemy spies.
No.
This resistance came from right here within America itself.
From within.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into this fascinating and often overlooked chapter of American history.
Absolutely.
We're exploring the stories of those who resisted the draft during World War II, using the study Opposition to the Draft, Resistance and Conscientious Objectors in WWII as our guide.
Perfect.
It's a common misconception that everyone was just gung-ho about joining the war effort, right?
It is, when you consider the Selective Training and Service Act of 1940,
Okay.
the first peacetime draft in U.S. history.
Wow.
You know, it's clear that the reality was much more nuanced.
Yeah.
Imagine the impact of suddenly requiring all men between 21 and 35 to register for potential military service. Over 10 million men ended up being drafted.
Wow.
A massive mobilization that inevitably sparked resistance from various groups.
It's hard to imagine 10 million being drafted.
Yeah.
Let's start with maybe the most striking example.
Okay.
Japanese Americans.
Right.
Many of whom were already facing the injustice of internment camps.
Right.
It's almost impossible to fathom
Yeah.
what it must have been like to be imprisoned by your own country and then be told you have to fight for it.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
The irony is truly staggering.
it is.
We're talking about American citizens stripped of their freedom,
Right.
their loyalty questioned,
Yeah.
and then expected to take up arms for the very government responsible for their imprisonment.
Kiyoshi Okamoto, a leader in the resistance movement,
Okay.
at Heart Mountain Relocation Center, captured the sentiment so powerfully in his protest letter.
Yeah.
He wrote, "I was evacuated without due process of law.
Wow.
I am concentrated without due process of law. I exist within this militarily guarded enclosure as a citizen without a country without due process of law."
Powerful stuff.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
This wasn't simply about avoiding the draft.
No.
It was a profound statement about the denial of their fundamental rights.
It really was.
And their resistance went beyond words.
Yeah.
The Fair Play Committee at Heart Mountain
Okay.
took a stand through civil disobedience, refusing to comply with draft procedures.
Right.
63 men from the camp were ultimately arrested
Wow.
and sentenced to federal prison for their actions.
Wow.
A stark reminder of the personal cost of resistance.
Yeah, definitely.
What's also interesting is the deep divide this created within the Japanese American community.
Absolutely.
Some viewed these resistors as disloyal,
Yeah.
while others saw them as heroes fighting for their constitutional rights. It complicates our understanding of patriotism during wartime.
Absolutely. And to add another layer of complexity,
Yeah.
you have the incredible story of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, made up entirely of Japanese Americans.
Wow.
This unit went on to become one of the most decorated in U.S. military history,
Oh, really?
showcasing a very different form of patriotism.
It's mind-boggling to think about these two contrasting experiences happening simultaneously.
It is.
Makes you realize how diverse the responses to the war were, even within a single community.
Yeah, and the fact that it took until 1947
Oh, wow.
for President Truman to pardon these resistors, including those from internment camps,
Okay.
speaks volumes,
Wow.
raises questions about whether society ever truly came to terms with the moral challenges their resistance posed.
Yeah.
Even after the war, there seemed to be a reluctance to fully acknowledge the injustice they faced
Right.
and the sacrifices they made for their principles.
It's almost like that delayed pardon underscores the discomfort these acts of resistance caused,
Yeah.
even years later. It certainly makes you think about the lasting impact of these events on American society. But those imprisoned Japanese Americans weren't the only ones resisting the draft.
Right.
Another group driven by their conscience also stood their ground.
Okay.
Conscientious Objectors, or COs.
Right. And it's important to understand that these weren't simply people trying to avoid military service.
Okay.
We're talking about individuals whose deeply held religious or moral beliefs made participating in war an impossibility.
So it wasn't just about dodging a bullet.
Yeah.
It was a deeply personal, ethical stance.
Precisely. And the Selective Training and Service Act actually recognized this,
Oh,
offering COs alternative ways to serve.
okay.
Some chose non-combatant roles like medics,
Right.
while others opted for the civilian public service or CPS.
Okay, so tell me more about this CPS.
Sure.
What kind of work did it involve?
The CPS provided a way for COs to contribute to the war effort in non-military ways.
Okay.
They performed what was considered work of national importance, often in very challenging conditions.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about fighting forest fires, working in mental hospitals, and other essential but often demanding tasks.
That's a lot.
It certainly wasn't an easy way out.
No, so this dismantles that stereotype some might have about COs being draft dodgers or cowards. These were people willing to serve,
Right.
just not in a way that violated their conscience.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, one of the most compelling examples is the story of Desmond Doss,
Okay.
a Seventh-day Adventist who refused to even carry a weapon.
Oh.
He became a medic.
Okay.
And during the horrific Battle of Okinawa, he single-handedly rescued 75 wounded soldiers while under intense enemy fire.
Oh my gosh.
Incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He received the Medal of Honor, becoming the first conscientious objector to be awarded this highest military honor.
Talk about courage without a weapon.
Talk about courage without a weapon. His actions really make you rethink the definition of bravery. Doss's story, along with countless others from the CPS, shatters the misconception that COs were somehow less patriotic or courageous.
Right.
These individuals demonstrated immense bravery and selflessness, just in a different form.
Absolutely.
It's clear that these COs faced a difficult choice.
Yeah.
They could either betray their deeply held beliefs or face potential imprisonment for refusing to serve in a traditional military capacity. Their stories really highlight the moral complexities of war.
Absolutely.
But the COs weren't a monolithic group, right?
No. Yeah.
Weren't there a variety of reasons for their objection to war?
Absolutely. While many COs came from pacifist religious groups like Quakers and Mennonites,
Okay.
others were driven by personal philosophical or moral convictions.
So, a real mix.
Yeah. What's fascinating is that their reasons for objecting to war were just as diverse as their backgrounds.
That makes sense. I mean, the decision to resist the draft, to potentially face imprisonment or public scorn, must have been deeply personal and rooted in a wide range of beliefs.
Exactly. And one of the most compelling examples of this diversity is the starvation studies conducted by COs during the war.
Starvation studies.
Yes.
That sounds pretty intense. What were those all about?
Well, these studies involved CO volunteers who agreed to undergo severe caloric restriction
Wow.
to help scientists understand the effects of famine
Oh, wow.
and develop more effective relief efforts for war-torn Europe.
Wow.
They endured months of hunger and physical hardship,
Oh, my God.
all in the name of helping others.
That's incredible. It's another example of how COs found ways to serve and contribute even when it involved personal sacrifice. It really challenged the notion that they were simply trying to avoid hardship.
It certainly does. Their willingness to endure such extreme conditions for the benefit of others speaks volumes about their commitment to their principles
Right.
and their desire to make a positive impact, even in the midst of war.
So we have these incredibly diverse groups,
Yes.
both Japanese Americans and COs, choosing to resist the draft during World War II. I'm curious to know how the government responded to these different forms of resistance.
Okay.
Were they treated equally?
Well, that's where things get even more complicated.
Okay.
The government's response was far from uniform
Yeah.
and varied, depending on the perceived threat posed by each group.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the government's response to resistance during World War II was really a mixed bag.
Yeah. Different groups, different reactions.
Different groups, different reactions.
For those who refused induction outright,
Okay.
like some Jehovah's Witnesses,
Mm-hmm.
whose beliefs prohibited any form of military service.
Right.
Imprisonment was often the consequence.
Wow.
Over 4,000 Jehovah's Witnesses were jailed for their beliefs.
Over 4,000.
Yeah.
That's a staggering number.
It is.
To think about just like the strength of their convictions,
Yeah.
knowing they would likely end up in prison for standing by their principles.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about what you would have done in that situation.
Yeah, it's a testament to their unwavering commitment to their faith.
It really is.
On the other hand, there was a certain level of respect,
Okay.
even if grudging,
Yeah.
for those who participated in the CPS
Right.
or took on non-combatant roles.
Right.
Their contributions, particularly in those essential civilian services,
Yeah.
were acknowledged as valuable to the war effort.
But it sounds like the Japanese-American resistance, despite being rooted in the fight for civil rights, was met with a much harsher response.
You're right. Their resistance was often perceived as a direct threat to wartime authority, not just a matter of personal conscience. The mass trail of the 63 resistors from Heart Mountain stands out as a stark example.
Wow.
It was the largest trial in Wyoming's history.
Wow.
And resulted in prison sentences for all involved.
It's almost as if their resistance, by challenging the very notion of what it meant to be an American during wartime, struck a nerve that the CO resistance didn't.
You've hit on a crucial point. The wartime context, the fears surrounding national security, and the deep-seated prejudice against Japanese Americans all played a role in how their resistance was perceived and treated.
It exposed the hypocrisy at the heart of America's war effort, fighting for freedom and democracy overseas, while denying those very rights to its own citizens at home.
A painful reminder that even in times of national crisis, we must be vigilant in safeguarding the rights of all citizens, regardless of their race or origin.
Absolutely. And the stories of these resistors, both Japanese Americans and Kuos, serve as powerful reminders of the importance of speaking truth to power. And challenging injustice even when it's unpopular or dangerous.
Absolutely.
Their actions also raise a fascinating question for me. Does resistance always have to be loud and visible to be effective?
Yeah, it's a great observation.
Like the COs, for example, often worked quietly behind the scenes, contributing in ways that weren't always recognized or celebrated.
It challenges the traditional notion of what constitutes effective resistance. The CIOs demonstrated that quiet acts of service rooted in deeply held convictions can be just as powerful as more overt forms of protest. They chose a different path, one that didn't involve carrying a weapon, but still required immense courage and commitment.
Absolutely. Their stories make you realize that resistance can take many forms. And that true bravery doesn't always involve grand gestures. It can be found in the quiet determination to live by one's principles, even when it means facing hardship or persecution.
And the impact of these quiet acts of resistance shouldn't be underestimated.
Right.
The CIOs, through their alternative service in hospitals, farms, and forests, made tangible contributions to the war effort while staying true to their beliefs.
It makes you wonder, how do we define heroism in times of war? Is it solely about battlefield bravery, or can it also encompass those who choose a different path?
Right.
One guided by conscience and a commitment to serving humanity in a non-violent way.
Those are important questions to consider.
They are.
The traditional narratives of war often focus on military victories and heroic acts on the battlefield.
Right.
But the stories of these resistors encourage us to broaden our definition of heroism. To include those who fight for their beliefs in less conventional ways.
Their actions remind us that courage can manifest in many different forms.
Right.
And that true patriotism can sometimes mean challenging the actions of one's own government.
It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely. And the legacy of these resistors extends far beyond World War II. They helped pave the way for future civil rights movements and inspired generations of activists to challenge injustice and fight for a more equitable society.
It's fascinating to see how these seemingly individual acts of resistance during a time of global conflict
have such far-reaching consequences.
Speaking of history, I'm curious about how historians have interpreted the significance of draft resistance during World War II. Has there been a consistent view? Or are there different schools of thought on this topic?
The historiography surrounding draft resistance is actually quite complex. And has evolved over time. Different schools of thought have emerged, each offering a unique perspective on the meaning and significance of these acts of defiance.
So it's not just a simple case of this is what happened, but rather a matter of interpretation and debate among historians.
Exactly. For example, traditionalist historians, who often focus on military and political narratives, tend to downplay the importance of resistance, framing it as a minor blip on the radar in a time of overwhelming national unity. They emphasize the collective fight against fascism and the sacrifices made by those who served in the armed forces. So they see resistance as a side note, something that didn't fundamentally challenge the dominant narrative of the war.
In their view, it's a footnote, not a central theme.
A footnote.
Yeah.
But then you have revisionist historians who take a very different approach.
Right. Revisionist historians tend to challenge traditional interpretations of historical events.
Okay.
In this case, they see draft resistance as a powerful symbol of opposition to government overreach.
Okay.
And the suppression of civil liberties.
Right.
Particularly for marginalized groups like Japanese Americans.
So for them, it's a much more significant event.
Right.
One that exposes the flaws and hypocrisies of American society during wartime.
Precisely. They argue that understanding these acts of resistance is crucial to gaining a more complete and nuanced understanding of the war and its impact on American society.
Okay, so we have these two very different interpretations, but are there other ways of looking at this history?
Absolutely. Social historians, for example, take a broader approach.
Yeah.
They examine how the draft and resistance to it reflected wider social tensions and anxieties related to race, class, religion, and the changing role of the individual in modern society.
So they're looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
How these individual acts of resistance connect to larger societal structures and power dynamics.
Exactly. And then you have legal historians who focus on the legal implications of draft resistance.
Okay.
They examine how the courts handled cases of civil disobedience.
Right.
The development of legal precedents related to conscientious objections, and the impact of wartime decisions on civil rights and constitutional law.
Wow. So many different lenses through which to view these events.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that history is never simple or one-sided.
Right.
There are always multiple perspectives and interpretations, each offering valuable insights.
And it's precisely these nuances and complexities that make history so fascinating to study.
Right.
By exploring these different perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding not only of the past, but also of ourselves and the challenges we continue to grapple with today.
It's like these historical events act as mirrors, reflecting back to us our own values and beliefs.
Yeah.
They challenge us to think critically about our own assumptions and biases and to consider the world from multiple perspectives.
Exactly. And that's one of the most valuable things about studying history.
Yeah.
It expands our understanding of the human experience.
Right.
And encourages us to engage in meaningful conversations about the issues that matter most.
So we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
from the personal stories of resistors to
Right.
the broader historical context and the varying interpretations of these events.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
You're right. The history of draft resistance during World War II is a rich and complex tapestry,
It really is.
woven with threads of courage, conscience,
Yeah.
and the enduring struggle for justice and equality.
It's a story that continues to resonate today,
It does.
reminding us of the importance of individual action, the power of dissent, and the enduring relevance of history in shaping our understanding of the world. It's incredible to think about how these individual acts of resistance during World War II, whether from Japanese Americans fighting for their civil rights or Kayos just following their conscience, connect to these broader historical debates.
That's fascinating.
Their stories challenge us to look beyond those kind of simplistic narratives of war.
Absolutely.
And really grapple with the complexities of things like patriotism, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between individual rights and national security.
You know, one of the things that struck me throughout our deep dive is how relevant these stories feel today.
Right.
We're still grappling with many of the same questions about civil liberties, government authority, and the nature of dissent in a democracy.
We see echoes of these struggles in debates over things like surveillance programs, restrictions on free speech, and the treatment of minorities during times of conflict or perceived national security threats.
It makes you wonder, have we truly learned from the past?
Yeah. Are we any better equipped to safeguard individual rights while also protecting the nation?
Those are tough questions.
They are.
And I don't think there are easy answers.
Right.
But I think by studying these historical examples, by understanding the motivations and challenges faced by those who came before us, we can gain valuable insights into our own present-day dilemmas.
It's like these stories provide a roadmap. Not necessarily with like specific directions, but just with a framework for thinking about these complex issues.
Framework,
They remind us that there are always multiple perspectives.
Absolutely.
That dissent is crucial to a healthy democracy.
It is.
And that power, even when exercised with good intentions, must always be held accountable.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the most important takeaways from this deep dive. The realization that history isn't just about the past.
Yeah.
It's about understanding ourselves and the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
It's about learning from the mistakes and triumphs of those who came before us.
Yeah.
And using those lessons to navigate the challenges of our own time.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this exploration of draft resistance during World War II,
Okay.
I want to circle back to the question we posed earlier. Does resistance always have to be violent to be effective?
Right.
I think the stories we've discussed today offer a resounding answer.
I agree. The Japanese-American resistors and conscientious objectors,
Right.
through their acts of civil disobedience, their legal challenges, their alternative service,
Yeah.
and their unwavering commitment to their principles,
Right.
demonstrated that there are many ways to fight for justice and make a difference.
They showed that speaking truth to power, even in the face of adversity, can be a powerful force for change.
Absolutely.
Their actions, though, often quiet and unassuming, had a profound impact, both in their own time and for generations to come.
Right.
They really challenge us to rethink our own definitions of courage and heroism.
Absolutely. And I think that's a crucial message,
Yeah.
especially for young people today
Right.
who are facing their own set of challenges and injustices.
Yeah.
The stories of these resistors offer hope and inspiration,
We do.
reminding us that individual actions, however small they may seem, can ripple outwards and create positive change.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable world.
We do.
And that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the human spirit can prevail.
Beautifully said. Their stories inspire us to stand up for what we believe in,
They do.
to challenge injustice wherever we see it,
Right.
and to never give up hope for a better future.
Yeah.
The fight for civil rights, for peace, for a world where every individual is treated with dignity and respect is an ongoing one.
It is.
And the legacy of these resistors serves as a beacon guiding us on that journey.
So, as we conclude our deep dive into this fascinating chapter of American history, we encourage you to reflect on the stories we've shared today.
Please do.
Think about the choices these individuals made, the sacrifices they endured,
Right.
and the impact they had on the world.
Absolutely.
And ask yourself, what forms of resistance do you see in your own time?
Yeah.
How can you contribute to creating a more just and equitable world? What legacy will you leave behind?
The answers to those questions are deeply personal
Yeah.
and will vary for each individual.
Right.
But one thing is certain.
Okay.
The stories of these resistors remind us that we all have the power to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is the most enduring legacy of their courageous actions.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these questions.
Okay.
And to continue exploring the rich tapestry of history. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.